Hey, this is Bobby. I'm so sorry that I couldn't be with you today. I'm sorry my flight got canceled. I want to thank you for inviting me to come speak on this very important topic. Here in the United States, we face many threats. I think two of the most important foreign policy threats we face are first, a nuclear-armed Iran, and second, the threat of radical Islamic terrorism. First, in terms of a nuclear-armed Iran, make no mistake about it. A nuclear-armed Iran is an existential threat to Europe, to Israel, but also to the United States. We must not allow Iran to become a nuclear power, and make no mistake about it. Once Iran becomes a nuclear power, the Saudis, the Egyptians, the Turks, they'll want nuclear capabilities as well. I fear this president wants a bad deal better than no deal at all. That's why I was proud to support Senator Cotton's effort to make sure that Iranians and others know that any deal that this president negotiates is not binding on the next president, especially if he does not submit it to congressional ratification. I think Congress needs to do two things right now. Number one, they need to pass legislation making clear that any deal's got to come to Congress. Secondly, they need to add additional sanctions on Iran. There's bipartisan support for both of these concepts. It's time for Congress to act today. Make no mistake about it, Prime Minister Netanyahu was right to warn the American people about the dangers of a nuclear-armed Iran. The second threat we face is the threat of radical Islamic terrorism. It is painful to watch our president. He almost can't even bring himself to say those words, radical Islamic terrorism. Let's review what's going on. We've got radical Islamic terrorists. They're literally beheading, torturing, and killing innocents all across the Middle East. They're killing Muslims, Jews, and Christians. Killed over 100 school children in Pakistan. They're beheading journalists and others. They burned alive a Jordanian pilot. These terrorists are barbarians. It is time now for Muslim leaders. It is time now for Muslim leaders to condemn not just generic acts of violence, but rather the individuals themselves by name. And to make it clear, these are not martyrs who are going to go and enjoy a reward in the afterlife, but they're going straight to hell. Secondly, we in the West have a responsibility. We need to stand up and insist on assimilation and integration for those who want to come live in our society. It used to be common sense to think that if you wanted to come to America, you should want to be an American. It used to be common sense to describe America as this great melting pot. Indeed, my parents came here over 40 years ago in search of the American dream. Today, however, the politically correct crowd doesn't like it when you say things like that. They don't like it when you insist on English. They don't like it when you want to teach about American exceptionalism in history and civics classes. Instead, they tell you that's somehow culturally arrogant. When I gave a speech describing these concepts in London, they called me a racist. They said I was anti-Muslim, and that is nonsense. The reality is there's nothing wrong with saying for those who want to come to our society, they shouldn't come to try to impose their version of Sharia law. They shouldn't come and try to undermine our freedoms, to use the freedoms we give them, to undermine the freedoms we give to anybody and everybody in our great country. And that brings me to our president. It pains me to say this. I don't take any joy in saying this, but our president, I believe, President Obama, has disqualified himself to be commander-in-chief. I actually said that on the lawn of the White House in response to a reporter's question. The reason I say that, look at his rhetoric. He tells us, for example, his own administration, Eric Holder, the Attorney General, tells us we're not at a time of war. Over at the State Department, they tell us that we're not going to kill our way to victory in this war. That's ridiculous. How else do you get victory in a war? Instead, they tell us we need a jobs program and better governance. Apparently, a war in poverty is okay, but not a war in radical Islamic terrorism. Our president refuses to even name the enemy, the radical Islamic terrorists that we confront. How can we beat them if we don't identify the enemy? Our president refuses to unequivocally stand with Israel as they confront Hamas, Hezbollah. We're seeing Iran expand their influence in Iraq, in Syria, and the Lebanon. These are serious times. And I'll close with a final observation. I think America can and will be successful, but we must not hollow out our military. Peace through strength is not just a cliche. We have a president who may be the first in our country's history who does not believe in American exceptionalism, who truly believes in multilateralism as a goal instead of a tactic, who for whatever reason doesn't seem to understand that a stronger America is good for our allies, but it's also good for the world, who doesn't seem to understand the best way to avoid war is to prepare for it. America must be able not just to win, but to dominate any potential conflict. Ronald Reagan understood that. We need to remember peace through strength is the best way for America to defeat any adversary, whether it's radical Islamic terrorists or other potential adversaries, enemies that are lurking out there. That's what brings me to my final point. 2016 is a very important election. It's not optional that we win, not because it's important for the Republican Party or for conservatives, because it's important for America. Our president's trying to redefine the very idea of America, the American dream. He's trying to hollow out our military. He's trying to lead from behind, which is not leading at all. We need to win this election to get America on the right track. We must win this election. We can win this election. We will win this election. Thank you for coming together and discussing this very important topic. I believe that America is still the greatest country in the history of the world and that our best days are ahead of us. God bless you all, and thank you all very much for inviting me to this very important discussion.